In today's episode, we sit down with Chris, who shares his deeply personal journey from being adopted as a baby to discovering the lifelong impact of that early experience. Through honesty, reflection, and courage, Chris opens up about the emotional layers of adoption, mental health, and what it truly means to understand yourself. So, Chris, do you mind starting by sharing a little bit of your personal story?
Yeah, so I was removed from my biological parents when I was 6 weeks old, um, because long story short, my biological dad shook me. I think because I was crying.
No,
Um, so he shook me, which obviously isn't great for a little baby.
no.
This caused me to start having a seizure. I wasn't very well. It turned out I had a brain hemorrhage. So obviously rushed to hospital. The nurses knew exactly really what had happened. Social services got involved, and I was removed from them, put in a place of safety, as they called it, which turned out to be a long-term foster family for the next 2 years, um, until I was adopted. At roughly 2 years old it was, um, uh, and the rest is history, I suppose.
Wow, that's a really difficult start, Chris.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose so. Not you can't remember these things, but
No, maybe
yeah,
that's a blessing in
I
that.
think it
But
is. I think
yeah,
it is. Not that it hasn't left any underlying underlying issues, but
no.
yeah, it's a good thing that you don't remember those sorts of things.
I, thank you, firstly, for sharing that. Um, I suppose you were adopted, and then was there a particular moment or incident, experience that sparked you wanting to look into those long term impacts, like you just mentioned? You know, those underlying things.
Yeah, so I think it's quite common um, for adult adoptees that when you have your own children, that's when the big picture reveals itself, I
Okay,
suppose.
okay.
So I've got two children, but obviously it's when my eldest turned two,
Mm-hmm.
and I suddenly just thought, hold on, that's the age where I, you know, got adopted, moved out of the foster family.
Yeah.
And when you look at your own child who's two, a 2 year old, they're switched on. You formed a relationship. You formed a relationship with them. They know who you are. They're not a little baby anymore. They're 2 years old, and that suddenly hit me. I thought, hold on, at that age, that's when I got shifted again, sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's when I got adopted, and I think that did hit me quite hard. And then when we had our second child, when he turned two, it hit me even harder. Um, so that's when the real work started, I think. So that was definitely the time. Not that I was never interested before.
Mhm.
I I've always been inquisitive um into the whole, who are my biological family, and that's always in the back of your mind. Um but I did act on it before. I did trace biological family before I had my own children. But even then, I don't think the full impact really hit me. Um, it was almost like, I was wearing, you know, sunglasses, which, you could sort of see through, but not. Do you know what I mean? It was the full force hadn't hit me then. I was just finding family members, and okay, this is cool, this is cool. And then, like I said, it's only when I had my own children that I got hit by the bus,
Wow.
metaphorically,
Yeah.
and yeah, it really hit home. So
Twice, not just once as well, but
mhm. Yeah,
twice.
yeah, definitely.
How would you say your understanding of adoption and being adopted has changed over time? It sounds like you've gone through quite a few pivotal moments.
Mm.
But but how has it changed from, I guess, where you were to where you are now?
So I'd say it's been in the past year. I've
Really?
been on a very fast, short journey, um, and it's. I don't know. Maybe I'll say that I used to think it was just this thing that happened when you was a baby,
Hmm.
um, and then you realise that it's a massive deal, and especially I think being moved twice. You know,
Yeah.
you was with biological parents, then you're with foster family,
Hmm.
then adoptive family. And so in the past year, I think I've done a lot of research. I've read a lot of books, which has took a bit of patience because I don't read very well.
And
I
they're
can read, don't
heavy.
get me wrong, I can read, but
Yeah.
sitting still and concentrating doesn't come naturally.
No.
Um, so I've read a lot of books, listened to a lot of podcasts, um, and I've also joined like a group where other adult adoptees we all meet up. I don't know, once every 6 weeks. So I suppose I've thrown myself into it, but I think I had to because I've, it was something I had to quickly do because it hit me so hard. But I think just to help myself cope, I had to do all this stuff as well. I needed to understand because my head was starting to spin, and you've also got this as an adoptee. You've got this thing that hold on, this happened to me, you know, when you're pre-verbal, when you're an infant, and you haven't got any recollection about it. And me personally, it wasn't discussed in my adoptive family.
Okay.
Um, so, and I don't know if that's, I was born in the 80s, and maybe that's the way it was done back then. It wasn't encouraged to new adoptive parents to talk about these things. I mean, they told me when I was young enough to understand, and that was it. That was the last it was ever mentioned. Um, So as I was saying, it's like this thing that happened to you a long time ago when you don't understand and you don't remember, and all of a sudden you think, hold on, you feel a bit cheated, a little bit left in the dark, and you need to understand, you need to know, you need to figure out what happened, um, and you need to do all this in one hit. You need to do it all straight away in one go, because that's where your head is at. So that's what I did, and I've learned a lot in the past year. Everything down to what happened to me personally, the theories behind attachment, all sorts of things. What happens? What symptoms you can develop growing up as an adoptee? Psychological, some physical. I've learned a lot, and it has helped. It has helped. If I'd have stayed in the dark, I think my mental health would really be suffering right now. So learning that stuff really helped me cope, I think.
And that's completely understandable. One, that you were spinning, and two, that your mental health would have took a real hit if you didn't. Has it helped you to understand you differently? Has it?
Yes, it has. And I never thought about that, but you're right. It has more, maybe, I'm not going to say a spiritual level, but maybe I've understood my subconscious a bit better, I think. Um, and also, it's made me more aware of my own behavior, I suppose, my own actions, um, and why maybe I've got short fuse sometimes or things like that. It slowed me down, and lots of other little things. But it's definitely helped me understand more about myself. Um, and it's been a bit of an eye opener, I must admit. Um, but it's helped in that way as well. Um, so yeah, definitely it has given me a better understanding of who I am.
That's brilliant. And that self-reflection stuff, it's heavy at the best of times. But I think I can imagine that there's a lot of positive, but also a lot of difficulty that comes out of doing that work.
Yeah, yeah. I have actually signed up to see a counsellor. I don't think you can sort of handle this sort of thing by yourself, which I think maybe I could have. I've had mental health issues in the past, which was never got to the bottom of. But none of the therapists I saw ever actually looked into the fact that I'm adopted. Um,
Oh wow.
and I mean, we're going back almost 15 years. So even back then, I don't know how much was focused on there
Mm.
used to be the opinion that a baby can get adopted and there's no implication.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
knock on effect. There used to be that theory, didn't
They
there?
did.
And I don't know how far back that went, and I don't know when it stopped being so. I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but I don't know when it became more conscious that
Yeah.
actually there are long term effects. So when I saw counsellors before for depression, anxiety, and things like that, maybe causes and effects of being adopted weren't a thing then. So yeah, I did have to have help with mental health before. Like I was saying, I have built up a good understanding, um, and because I've been through things before,
Mhm.
I have, I suppose deep down I've created like tools to help myself, but I still don't think this is something you can just get through without bouncing a few ideas off someone else. Um, so yeah, I am seeing a counsellor as well, which is helping in things like that. So yeah, it's a big thing.
Oh, it's huge, when you're unpacking trauma, Chris, and everybody needs help with that. So, I think you mentioned that kind of, and you're right that in the 80s it was pretty much a pattern that we might mention you're adopted and then we'll move on. We've said it, we're done. Let's crack on. But thinking back to how it was for you then, and how you are now, and everything you've learned along the way, what are some key things that you wish your adoptive parents knew? I guess especially if we're thinking about mental health, when we're thinking about supporting emotional well-being. But if you could go back to that time, what and the things you've learned, what do you wish that they knew?
I think I just wish that it had been open conversation in my house.
Okay.
And I have recently spoke to my adoptive dad about this,
Oh wow.
which is the first time it's ever been mentioned in the past 30. They've had me for 35 years,
Wow.
um, so we don't have the closest relationship anyway. And we had to have a chat about something. And I thought um, while we're on a deep level talking about something else, let's throw this in there as well. Um, and I did mention it to him. I said, you know, it just needs to be an open topic of conversation because as a child, you almost follow your parents' lead, and if they're not talking about something, you don't talk about something, um, and that's exactly what happened. And then that has a knock-on mental effect because it almost it almost tries to deny who you were before and where you're from, and you can't tell a child you're adopted and you came from somewhere else, but now we're your parents. And you can't just leave it like that.
No.
And that's how it basically was left. And I think that's how it was left for a lot of adopted people back in
Yeah.
those times.
Yeah.
Um, and the little child who's probably, I remember, I don't remember much about my childhood, but I've
Okay.
had a few memories of how I felt.
Mhm.
And I remember being very scared. I remember when I was young, I was scared. And I'm guessing it's because I'd built a relationship up for 2 years with my foster family, and then with someone else, and I was extremely scared. This is how I remember feeling, and especially when you're scared and you just want to get on with life because this is where you are now. You almost don't want to rock the boat, do you? So you don't ask these questions, um, and I think that's where the adult in the situation needs to step up
Yeah.
and make it that open conversation that the child can then feel happy to start if they need to.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that adoptive parents need to do. Keep it an open line of conversation. I'm not saying let's hammer it every day,
No.
but at least if it's mentioned here and there, and the child knows that it's safe to talk about it, then that's the best thing to do.
Yeah, just that permission to have space if you
Yeah,
need to is
exactly.
huge, isn't
Hmm.
it? And I think that, you touched on it, and I can't imagine how incredibly scary it is. Uh, and then not remembering much of your childhood, and that might be that your brain's like, do you know what? I'm just going to survive. I'm just going to get through. but that comes at an emotional cost, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's that book. I don't know if you've read it, but some people might have read it. The Primal Wound,
Hmm.
um, written by Nancy Verrier,
That's it.
and she says, "What is it? There's two types of adoptees. There's the ones that keep their head down and don't cause trouble because there's the fear of being moved again or being ignored again, and then there's the one that tests. Now, I've got an adopted brother, and he's older. He was definitely the one that tested. Uh, let's just say he had a lot of strong behaviour growing up, and but I was the quiet one. What do they call it? I can't really say. Like I was the one that just tried to fit into the background and
You're the
people
compliant
pleaser,
one. Yeah.
the compliant one. That's right. And I suppose that goes along with the whole not me not talking about the adoption because again, you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to make your new parents feel awkward, and that could lead to other things. So you just stay quiet. And I think that was basically me. I think.
Wow. And we can just assume, can't we, you're that child who's compliant, getting along with it, not rocking the boat, that they're okay, but it's actually all of that hurt that's underneath that's not
Mm.
being addressed.
Yeah, and that just builds up over time. The longer it goes on, the more it builds up. And then I think with a lot of people who get adopted, where it's never talked about, and this happened for me, you get into adolescent years where you try and figure out who you are and all that nonsense, and then it all just gets tangled up together with the where have I come from type stuff and all this
Mm.
stuff that wasn't spoken about for the past 15 or so years, and it just all spills out.
That's understandable, though.
Mm,
That's fair. That's fair enough, I think.
yeah, I think so.
So you said that you've thrown yourself into adoption and learning more, which is brilliant. It can consume you. I think there's so much to learn and to read, isn't there?
Yeah.
But
Some of it's really tricky reading as well.
you don't always make it easy, do
No.
they?
You know what? There's a certain book I've started reading, The Body Keeps the Score,
Okay.
and it's all about trauma and how then it affects the rest of the body and your nervous system, and that is not easy reading. And
Mm.
when you've got two little kids, and then your only spare time is after 8 o'clock at night, and you try and sit down and read a book like that,
It's not the time,
it,
is it?
it doesn't stay in your head. Let's put it that way.
We need a summarised version. If anybody's out there listening, do a
Yeah.
summarised version of that for us. Um, but I guess from your learning, your reading, your research, are there any misconceptions that you've encountered that about adopted people or from adoptive parents about what you should be like, or just anything where you think, you know what, that doesn't define us well, or that doesn't explain this properly?
I think in general in society, adoption still isn't, or well, the actual act of
Okay.
adopting. You know, everyone knows about that, but in general society, no one thinks anything more after that. No one
Mm,
thinks, and this comes into everybody related in the whole adoption constellation. No one thinks about the after effects.
mm,
You know, whether it's within the first year, the first 5 years, or 20 years down the line. Um, and even down to things like when you go to the doctors and they ask you on your medical history, well, not your own medical history, any history of this in the family, and you just have to say, "Well, I'm adopted," and
mm.
they just acknowledge that and move on. Oh, okay, no problem. And just things like that really gets to you sometimes
Because it is a
because that's just
problem. Like,
what it is, and it's just one more example where the everyone just assumes, like I said before, back in the 80s, everyone just assumes that you get adopted. Happy days. You know, the parents who couldn't have a child have got a child. The little child, the poor little child needed a family. Now they've got a family and everyone's happy. And that, I think sometimes even in the year we're in now, I think that's still the general attitude.
like you had Chris of, okay, you're adopted, we'll move on. And there's not a narrative, there's not an understanding. You can see why it could quite easily feel that difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I'm just trying to say is that let's not pretend that there was no first family.
No,
That
we should
that
never
needs
do that.
remembering, that needs addressing. And I think in this day and age, when kids get adopted these days, that's very much hammered home, and
Yeah.
it's the way of doing things now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I know a lot of the
Yeah.
things I'm saying are from a couple of decades ago or
It
whatever.
doesn't, that's irrelevant, and there's still those messages. And I think you're right that there is still this lack of empathy for adopted adults, I would say. We can look at little ones who are adopted and maybe be like, okay, we need to be a bit sensitive about this. We need to watch how we say this or do this. But, as an adult, even that sitting in the doctors, it wouldn't be hard to just take a moment to sit with that, would it? When you talk about your
Exactly.
medical history, it's not.
Exactly. And I don't think unless you've actually looked into this, I don't think a lot of people know that it's a trauma. And
Mm,
obviously with trauma can then come PTSD, can't it?
of course.
If there's
Yeah.
trauma, there's post-traumatic stress
Yeah.
disorder, isn't there? Which, if you turn around to anybody and said, "I'm adopted, so I've got PTSD," I think they'd probably laugh at you, wouldn't they?
Mm.
Now, I'm not saying every adopted person's got
No,
PTSD,
no,
but
but
that is one of the realities. But I
yeah.
don't think, and this is the misconception in society. I don't
Mm,
think that people would take that seriously at all.
no.
Everyone thinks PTSD has to do with army veterans, doesn't it? Severe car crash survivors, but and that's the way it's looked at. So if you said I'm adopted, I've got PTSD, I think you get some funny looks.
Which is a shame, and you've hit on something really powerful there, actually, Chris, that is making me stop and think. And you're right, and it is a lifelong wound and a trauma that you carry. And I'm not saying that that means that life is never good or okay, but that's it's there, isn't it? It's a
Yeah,
lifelong thing.
yeah, yeah. It's not something you carry every day. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's
No.
a massive issue, but it's definitely explains some of my personality traits. I can struggle in social situations. I can
Mhm.
struggle with anxiety. Or, I struggle with this, struggle with that, and it has explained some of that. Yeah, I think if society in general maybe got more educated in things like that, then
Yeah,
I think a lot of those misconceptions could go away.
yeah, I
Um,
agree. That's the wish. That's what we're working towards, Chris. But I think, you've just said about understanding more explains maybe some of your behaviours or anxieties, and that, I'm guessing, might feel quite empowering because you stop thinking there's something wrong with me. What is it about me? And you can relate it to because of this.
yeah, I definitely think once you understand something, you have got more agency over it. You've definitely got, like you said, more power over it.
Yeah,
And yeah, you stop feeling as confused, and yeah, you can put a label on it, so it helps.
good, good. Um, how important, in your experience, is connection and community for adoptees?
For me personally, it's helped.
Okay.
Obviously, anything I say, I can only say from personal experience. For
Yeah.
me, it definitely helped. Um, I mean, there are adopted people out there who aren't really that affected, or it's still subconscious.
Mhm.
But I think if you definitely if it definitely hits you like it hit me, and other people, I think being in community, being in groups of other adoptee people, it's definitely got its benefits. It helped me. I'm part of a local one, um, and if anything, it's just nice to. It's hard for people who aren't adopted to understand
Yeah.
fully.
Yeah.
People can understand, but they might not understand fully.
Mhm.
Um, so, like with anything, it's nice to relate to other people who can understand. So it's definitely helped, and I'd suggest it to anyone who's struggling in my position. Just being able to talk things through, and as with all things, they might have a different twist and a different way of approaching things, and just listening. People just listen to your issues, who get it, and that always helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then hopefully by the end of another cup of coffee that you've had together, you can all leave feeling a bit better and laugh about the whole
Yeah,
thing.
that's the aim, I guess, isn't it? But it sounds like it's, you can't really measure how beneficial it is.
No, I mean, to be honest, it all depends as well what's happening currently. Um, so, like, I went through a bit of a, I'm going to call it a blip, because I have contact with my biological mum, very loose contact, and she caused a few issues to me recently. So I just had to go and let the steam off regarding that. Um, So, like I said, it all depends what's going on at the time as well. Sometimes, and that meeting fell at the right time because I think it was a week after this thing happened. Um, so the meeting fell at the right time, and I could just storm in, sit down, and just get it off my chest.
Yeah.
Um, and so, like I said, it helps anyway. But if you've got ongoing things happening, then obviously it really helps.
Yeah. It sounds like a safe space to just say what you need to and not
Exactly.
not be judged, which is lovely.
Yeah.
How can adoptive parents, in your opinion, create a space that feels safe and validating for their
So,
children?
like I said before, keep it an open conversation, um, and I think the parents need to do their own research and their own work, and also if there was a issue with infertility, I think they need to deal with that because that's loss, that's grief. So before anything, as well, they also need to both, mom and dad, they both need to have their own counselling if needed or whatever. They both need to deal with that. Um, because I think if adoptive parents are still holding on to their, infertility issues, I think that's always going to hinder them moving on. And I'm not going to say it'll be as extreme that they won't see their new child as theirs because they're still holding on to what they lost before. But you never know if that will have an impact. So I think they definitely need to do their own work if there was any infertility issues. Um, And then, yeah, keep it an open conversation. Let them do their own research, especially when it comes to things that might pop up later regarding the adoptive child's maybe mental well-being. So they're just ready. If they go in fully prepared, then they can handle any issues that arise later on. Um, but just be there. And if 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 the adopted child shows interest in wanting to get to know the biological parents, then the adoptive parents just try and have to accept it and encourage it if they need to, and just know that it's a natural thing. It's almost built into human beings. That bond to the biological mom is pretty much built in. Um, and they just also always need to remember that the child's still coming home to them at the end of the day. They're still mom and dad. Nothing's going to change. Well, things might change, but it's not going to impact anything. And that's something they always need to remember because I think that's a common fear for adoptive parents, isn't it? Oh, if my child gets to know his first mom, his first dad, am I going to lose them? And it's not like that.
It is natural, though, isn't it, to want to
Yeah,
go and understand more. And it's about knowing that the relationship is stronger than that. It's not a personal rejection of adoptive parents, I don't imagine.
no, of course not.
I think those are brilliant words, Chris. Thank you. What advice um, might you offer to adoptees who are struggling, whether that's identity, belonging, grief? Just, what would you say to them?
Mm, so obviously, like I said, this is coming from my personal, experience and theories. I found with the identity part, if they're struggling with identity, I found researching the biological family, I found that helped. Because part of the identity issue or being struggling with your identity it is almost that split, that divide, that you've got multiple families, but the one you might not know, obviously the original one, you might not know anything about. So for me personally, when I did struggle a little bit with identity, and it makes your head spin. Not that I knew that that's what I was worrying about or that's what was on my mind, because a lot of this is subconscious, isn't it? But I think looking back, I was struggling with identity. Anyway, so researching your biological family, and I'm not saying you have, if you don't want to, I'm not saying you have to get in touch with them, but just knowing what your start of life was, even looking at your biological parents' names, maybe what job they did, what part of the country they were from, even little things like that just gives you a solid foundation of, that family. Obviously, you've grown up with your adoptive family. You know them, and that's where the confusion lies. Well, hold on, I've come from somewhere else to start. So even just researching where you've came from. I'm not saying get in contact if that's not for you, because that's a whole other can of worms.
That's
Um,
another podcast episode, that is.
yeah, it definitely is. It definitely, I could go on forever. But that definitely gives you a solid foundation. If you're struggling with identity, get to know both sides. And if you were fostered, get to know that as well.
Mm.
And just increase your understanding. All of this helps if you increase your understanding. It's like anything. You're scared of the unknown. You're worried about the unknown, and that's where it all starts to spin. If you can understand as much as you can, you're going to help yourself. So I would definitely say research where you're from originally. Get counselling, because it's a lot to deal with by yourself. Even like I said, I've got a good understanding. I've got a good understanding of my own mental health, because I struggled when I was a teenager. But even now, with all this going on, you need a little bit of extra help.
Mm-hmm.
So get counselling. Like I said, research, understand, read books, listen to podcasts. Just I did throw myself in full whack, which I think my wife probably looked at going, "What's he doing? He's having a midlife crisis." Um, but I did throw myself in full whack, but it helped me. I had to understand everything
Yeah.
straight away, just to help. Um, Join groups, like I said, it helped me to join a group, discuss it with other people in the same position, and if you can, I would discuss things with your adoptive family. Because the last thing you need is the feeling that you're doing it behind their back, because that can add a whole new spin on your mental health.
Bet.
Um, and also maybe including them is probably for the best anyway. But in the end, they know you, you know them.
Mm.
You've already got people to talk to, haven't you?
Yeah.
I didn't. Like I said, in my family, we weren't very close. My mum's passed away. Talking to my dad is tricky. We've never really talked, so I didn't have that. I didn't have that group to talk to. My family, we're not on that level. But yeah, talk to as many people as you can. I think it would definitely help you out, and just get stuck in and research and understand.
Thank you for listening to this conversation with Chris. His story reminds us that adoption isn't just a single event, it's a lifelong journey of healing, discovery, and connection. If anything in this episode resonated with you, or if you'd like support, please reach out to an adoption or mental health organisation in your area.